Hello everyone and welcome back to another Marvel Champions video. Yesterday on Reddit, a bunch more cards for Scarlet Witch were revealed. I'll leave a link in the description where you can check out those images. I have them all here. There is a discussion on Reddit if you want to join in on that, which I'll leave a link for. Anyway, so here we have Scarlet Witch. This is her hero side. So 2 thwart, 1 attack, 2 defense. She's an Avenger and a Mystic and has the Chaos Control interrupt. Says when boost icons on an encounter card would be counted, discard the top card of the encounter deck and count the number of boost icons on that card instead. Limit once per phase. So Scarlet Witch has a bunch of abilities that do stuff depending on the number of boost icons that show up on a card. It'll say like discard the top card and add up the number of boost icons, and then like maybe there's cards that will say deal X amount of damage to a villain, where that's the number of boost icons that were revealed. We'll get to some of those cards in a little bit. So this allows you to, let's say you drop a card that has no boost icons, you can use her, this interrupt, to give you cards that maybe do have boost icons, so you can potentially do more damage or do more things. Like her Witch Bolt, I think, or Hex Bolt, whatever it's called, does stuff based on the number of boost icons. So I think there's stuff that happens at 0, 1, 2, and 3 or more. So if you need a certain one to happen, you can basically use this interrupt to potentially get more boost icons or the ones that the exact number that you need. So hand size looks like 5 and looks like 10 health. So that is Scarlet Witch. Doesn't look like she's got a whole lot of attack, but from what I've seen so far, most of her attack stuff comes out of her spells. So she doesn't have a huge attack, but 2 thwart is pretty good. So if you're playing with other players, you might use her for thwarting and then use her her spells for attacking, and then use her exhaust her to thwart to remove threat. So she can control the threat, potentially control some of the enemies with her spells, and then have the other players that you're playing with that are more heavy hitters just deal direct damage that way. So that is Scarlet Witch. We're going to move into our next card. And next up we have Wanda Maximoff, the alter ego side. She is a Mystic. So also has, so let's say, hand size of 6 and 10 hit points, so one more card depending on if you're in hero form or in alter ego form, so one more in alter ego. Has a recovery of 3, and has the supernatural siblings. As an action, discard 2 cards from your hand. To draw 2 cards, draw 3 cards instead. If Pietro Maximoff is in play, limit once per round. So that is Quicksilver. We should be getting Quicksilver this week. I believe he's coming out on Friday. So hopefully I'll be able to pick that up when it releases, or close to it anyway. So basically gets to draw 2 or draw 3 if you have Pietro Maximoff in play. Now I believe that means he probably needs to be on his alter ego side, because the hero side is Quicksilver. So I don't know if it will count as being Pietro if it's on the Quicksilver side. There's probably gonna have to be like a rules reference on that or something like that. But I imagine it will have to be on the alter ego side for that to work. So that is Wanda. We're gonna move into our next card. And next up we have Quicksilver. This one also has the subtitle of Pietro Maximoff. So I believe that ability from Wanda would work with this version of Quicksilver in play as well. This is the ally version. So it comes in, costs 4, generates a kind of wild resource when you play it, has 4 hit points, 1 thwart, 2 attack with 1 incidental damage for each, and as an action you can ready him, limit once per phase. So I believe the Quicksilver that's coming out, the hero Quicksilver, also has ways to basically, he can attack and then, like ready himself, attack again, or you can do double thwarting, double attacking, or one of each. But this one looks like it does have the same kind of ability. But again, like I said, it comes into with 4 hit points, and then can either thwart 1 or attack 2 and take 1 incidental damage for doing that. So that is Quicksilver, and like I said, I believe this, since it does say Pietro Maximoff right underneath Quicksilver, it's kind of hard to see in this image. The image is kind of not zoomed in super well, but that one does say Pietro Maximoff, so that should work with that ability. So that is Quicksilver. We're going to move into our next card. And next up, we have Chaos Magic. It's a 0-cost event. Generates a wild resource when you play it. It's a spell and a superpower, and as a hero action, play a card from your hand, ignoring its resource cost. Discard cards from the top of the encounter deck equal to the card's printed resource cost. So basically, she gets to play a spell for free and then get rid of that many cards from the encounter deck. That could be both good and bad, however. So It can be good because you might get rid of cards that you don't want to deal with when it comes time for the villain to flip off encounter cards. However, the more of these you use, and the more cards that get discarded out of the encounter deck, you are potentially going to be giving that villain an acceleration token, which would basically means that they get to place more threat per turn or per beginning of each round on the main scheme. So very early payoff. You can play a big spell or big card for free. You can get Quicksilver out for free because this says play a card from your hand that doesn't say anything about it being a certain type of card. So, like I said, Quicksilver costs 4. You can get Quicksilver out for free with this and then discard 4 cards off of the encounter deck. Again, kind of double-edged sword to the encounter deck because the faster you move through it, the more likely it is you're going to get to this point in the game where the encounter deck will be empty. They'll have to reshuffle it, and then the plots or the villain will get an acceleration token. I believe they get one every time you go through the encounter deck. Every time it has to get reshuffled, or when the cards are out and you reshuffle the discard pile into a new deck, they get an acceleration. So can be used to get some really good spells out, really good cards very easily. But then again, potentially going through that encounter deck faster is a slight drawback to this. So that is Chaos Magic. We're going to move into our next card. And next up, we have Hex Bolt. It's a 2-cost event, and it generates a mental resource when you play it. It's a spell and a superpower, and this is one of the cards I was talking about where you actually do start discarding cards off the encounter deck, and then the number of boost icons being counted determines these effects. So, hero action, discard the top 3 cards of the encounter deck. For each card discarded this way that has boost icons equal to 0, deal 2 damage to an enemy. 1, remove 2 threat from a scheme. 2, draw a card. Or 3 or more, place a status on a character. So I believe this is for each card discarded. I don't think it's a total. I don't think it's cumulative. It could be cumulative, but let's see. So discard the top 3 cards of the encounter deck for each card discarded this way that has boost icons in it equal to do this. Okay, so I think it might work where it's every card will trigger something. So if you discard 3 zeros, you can potentially deal 6 damage. If you do a 1. If you discard a 1, a 1, and a 1, you get to remove a potential of 6 threat from a scheme. It looks like it's probably going to be a mix, though. So there is card draw, threat removal, damage, and then if you have 3 or more showing on a card, it looks like you can place a status effect on them. So you can stun the enemy, confuse the enemy, give yourself or your teammates a tough status and stuff like that. So again, this is one of the cards where you're going to be kind of going through the encounter deck, and like it looks like a lot of Scarlet Witch's powers come from basically removing cards off of that deck and then doing stuff based on the number of boost icons. And this is one of those cards. So that is Hexbolt. We're going to move into our next card. And next up, we have Molecular Decay. 3-cost event, generates an energy resource when you discard when you use it for resources. It's an attack and the spell. It's a hero action attack. Deal 5 damage to an enemy and discard the top 2 cards of the counter deck. For each boost icon discarded this way, deal 1 additional damage to that enemy. So for 3 resources, it does a flat 5, and then you basically are going to discard 2 cards off the top of the encounter deck. And let's say you discard a total of 2 boost icons, it's going to do 2 more damage. So 5 damage for 3, it's not amazing. I think there's some other cards that do more damage for about the same cost. But the fact is you still get to get through that encounter deck, and you still can do potential extra damage based on the number of boost icons. It looks like you get a few of these in the deck as well. So that is Molecular Decay. We're going to move into our next card. I really like the artwork on that one too. It looks like a Sentinel kind of being destroyed, and then there's Scarlet Witch in the background there. So we're going to move into the next card here. And next up, we have Warp Reality. It's a 1-cost event. Generates a physical resource when you discard it. So it's a spell and a superpower as an interrupt. So when an encounter card is revealed in the encounter deck, cancel all of its effects and discard it. Discard cards on the top of the encounter deck equal to the number of boost icons on the card. So if you discard a card that has 2 boost icons, you get to basically discard that and then discard 2 more cards, or however many boost icons show up. So potentially, like I said, kind of a double-edged sword with using the encounter deck like this, because you may get rid of cards that you don't want to deal with, such as your obligations or your nemesis plots and stuff like that, or anything that you shuffled in there, or like Shadows of the Past, that's what I should have said. But you get to get rid of some of those, but then potentially running through the encounter deck that fast might get acceleration tokens for your for the plot for the villain. So that is Warp Reality. We're going to move into our next card. And next up, we have Agatha Harkness. One cost support generates a mental resource when you discard it. Looks like it says it's a persona. It's an alter ego action. Exhaust Agatha Harkness. Look at the top 3 cards of your deck. Add one of those cards to your hand, and place the rest on the bottom of your deck in any order. So basically, if you're in alter ego form, maybe you recover. You're using Wanda to recover. You can then exhaust Agatha, draw 3 cards, choose one to keep, put the other 2 on the bottom. It's a good way to kind of get a card that you might really need at the moment, and then 2 cards that you might not need right away can go on the bottom. So, and then if you're still in, basically whenever you're in on your alter ego form, you're able to do this. Basically, like let's say you stay in alter ego 2 rounds, for example, you get to do this one turn, draw 3, choose 1, put 2 on the bottom, and then do the process again, and hopefully get something else that you can really use once you do decide to flip back into Scarlet Witch. So that is Agatha Harkness. We're going to move into our next card. And next up, we have Magic Shield, 1 cost upgrade. It generates a physical resource when you discard it. It's a spell, and then it's also a hero interrupt. When a friendly character would take any amount of damage, discard Magic Shield, prevent 3 of that damage. So if you are getting attacked and you don't want to maybe exhaust your character to defend, you can basically play Magic Shield, discard it, and then prevent 3 damage. So let's say you have a character that's taking 3 damage, discard Magic Shield, that character takes no damage. Really interesting way to also kind of if you're dealing, let's say 6 and you have a defense of 3, you can basically prevent all that damage. So you could potentially say, I'm going to discard Magic Shield, prevent 3, then also defend with my hero to prevent the other 3. So that is Magic Shield, good way to prevent some damage, and I think the cost is good, so 1 cost to get that out isn't too bad. So that's Magic Shield. We're going to move into our next card. And next up, we have Scarlet Witch's Crest, 2 cost upgrade. It's an item and is an interrupt. When boost icons on an encounter card are counted, exhaust Scarlet Witch's Crest to increase or decrease the number of boost icons on that card by 1 for this count. So if you really want, let's say, a 2, and you flipped over a 3, you can use the crest to bring that 3 down to a 2. Or if you want it to be more, let's say it's a spell that says it does more damage based on the number of boost icons that get discarded, you can exhaust this to increase those boost icons from, let's say, boosting it from 2 to 3 to do a little bit of extra damage. I think it's going to work really well with the Hex Bolt, because Hex Bolt, let's say you really want to get a 2, you can then use this to kind of manipulate the number on the card by increasing or decreasing it. So that's pretty cool. So that is Scarlet Witch's Crest. We're going to move into our next card. And next up, we have Speed. That's an Avenger and an ally. Four resources, comes in with 4 health. Generates a physical resource when you discard it. 2 thwart and 1 attack with 1 incidental damage each. As a response, after Speed thwarts, ready him, limit once per round. So basically, he can come into play, he can thwart, he can ready, he can thwart again, and basically that's up to 4 thwart per round, which is pretty good. So comes in for 4 resources, but again, you can get that out for free with the other spell we talked about earlier. I do like the ability here where you can basically double thwart and get just removing 4 threat in 1 round from an ally is huge. And then you can also then potentially thwart with other characters as well if a lot of threat has been built up. Or let's say you have 2 plots in play right here. 2 schemes. You can thwart 1, remove 2, thwart or ready him, thwart again, and remove the 2 from another plot as well, or another scheme. So yeah, because after he thwarts, ready him, so basically he gets readied and they can do it again. So Speed is looking really cool, and I like the fact that you can kind of cheat him out with the other card from Scarlet Witch's deck that we talked about a little bit earlier. So that is Speed. We're going to move into our next card. And next up we have Wiccan. It's an ally, cost 2, comes in with 3 health, and generates a mental resource when you discard it. 1 thwart, 1 attack with 1 incidental damage each. It's an Avenger. And response, after Wiccan thwarts, discard the top card of the encounter deck. For each boost icon discarded this way, deal 1 damage to an enemy. So he thwarts. Let me see. Yeah. So basically, thwart, discard the top card. It's got, let's say, 2 boost icons, and then deal 2 damage as well. So you're getting the guaranteed threat removal from the thwart, plus potential more damage from whatever the number of boost icons that get discarded. Then again, double-edged sword of the encounter deck, but cool way to deal a little bit of extra damage while also controlling threat on the board as well. So that is Wiccan. We're going to move into our next card. And next up, we have Crisis Averted, 3-cost event. I can't tell what resource it generates because I believe it was kind of not there in the image. But it's a thwart action, so hero action thwart. Remove 6 threat from the main scheme. If you pay for this card using a mental resource, this thwart can ignore the crisis icon. So that's big. So 3 threat to remove, or 3 resources to remove 6 threat. And then if you use that resource, you can get your way around crises, because crises generally need to be dealt with before you deal with any other scheme. So if you have a icon or a scheme out there with crisis, you have to get rid of the threat on that card first before you can go after any other schemes. This, if you're using a mental resource, allows you to remove that 6th threat from the main scheme, as well as getting around crises. Now, if there's a crisis in play, I think maybe this card isn't playable at all because it has to be moved from the main scheme. So it looks like with this, you're probably always going to want to be using a mental resource or have some kind of card in play that when you exhaust it, you can get a mental resource. So that is Crisis Averted. We're going to move into our next card. And next up, we have Multitasking. 1-cost event generates a physical resource when you discard it. It's another thwarting event. So hero action thwart, remove 2 threat from a scheme. If you pay for this card using a mental resource, remove 2 threat from a different scheme. So it looks like it's 2 threat from a scheme and then also potentially 2 more threat, because it says remove 2 threat from a scheme, and then if you pay for this card using a mental resource, remove 2 threat from a different scheme. So that is basically, from the way I'm reading it, it's one resource to remove at least 2 threat, potentially 4 threat. So that could be really good. So that is Multitasking. We're going to move into our next card. Next up, we have Swift Retribution. 1-cost event generates a mental resource when you discard it. It's an attack, so hero action attack. The villain schemes, deal 4 damage to the villain. So if there's not a lot of threat on the main scheme, you can pay 1, allow them to scheme, and then deal 4 damage to them. Like, let's say they have 4 health left in whatever phase you're on. You can then use this, deal that 4 damage, let them scheme, but then also trigger them going to the next phase as well. Or if there's not enough threat on the main scheme, and you can survive having 4 more threat placed on there. Let's say there's 4 health left on the villain total for the entire game. Just pay 1, allow them to scheme, and then deal 4 damage to them to win. So that is Swift Retribution. We're going to move into our next card. And next up, we have Turn the Tide. 0-cost event generates an energy resource when you discard it. It's an attack. So response attack. After your hero thwarts and removes all threat from a scheme, deal 3 damage to an enemy. So pretty good here. So 0 cost. Basically, let's say it's a response to thwarting, basically. So let's say I'm going to thwart, remove the remainder of threat points on a scheme, and then basically deal 3 damage when you empty that scheme up. So after your hero thwarts and removes all the threat from the scheme. So let's say the main scheme has 2. Let's say you thwart for 2. You thwart 2, get rid of all the scheme or threat on that scheme. You can then respond with this to deal 3 damage to that enemy. That's pretty good as well. So a lot of the cards, and like I said, a lot of the cards in Scarlet Witch's deck that are attacks come from her other. They don't come from her directly. They come from her her spells and other cards that are in her deck. So, but I think like Scarlet Witch, if she was just to let's say hit somebody, probably wouldn't do a ton of damage. But her power really comes from her doing spells like warping reality, creating stuff, and creating false illusions and all that kind of stuff. So I think this is very thematic to how she works. So that is Turn the Tide. We're going to move into our next card. And next up, we have Order and Chaos. It's a 1-cost event. It looks like it generates a physical resource when you discard it. Team up, so Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch, max 1 per deck. Hero Interrupt. When a Treachery card is revealed from the encounter deck, cancel its when reveal effects, then deal 2 damage to the villain. And you do need to have Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver in play to be able to do this. I believe the Ant-Man and Wasp deck has a similar card, which I was actually able to use in my first game of Ant-Man because of the Wasp ally card. So the ally cards, I do believe, trigger this as well. So if you have, let's say you're playing as Ant-Man, and you have the Wasp ally, you can use it. In this case, you're playing as Scarlet Witch, and you have the Quicksilver ally, you will be able to do that as well. So basically, I like that. It's when it's revealed, you basically just cancel the effects of the encounter card when it gets revealed, and then deal 2 damage to the villain. So that is Order and Chaos. We're going to move into our next card. And next up, we have Spiritual Meditation, 0 cost event, generates a mental resource when you discard it. It's a spell. Play only if your identity has the Mystic trait. Action, draw 2 cards, choose and discard 1 card from your hand. So you get to draw 2, discard 1. So you get to take your pick of 2 cards from the top of the deck, see what's in your hand that you want to get rid of that, and keep those two cards. Or if you draw a really good card and a not so good card, you can discard the not so good card. Pretty good way to draw cards, and then also kind of filter your deck and and get rid of cards that might not be as beneficial to you in that time. So that is Spiritual Meditation. We're going to move into our next card. And next up, we have Browbeat. It's a 2 cost event. Generates a physical resource when you discard it. It's an attack. Play only if your identity has the vendor trait. And hero action attack, so deal 2 damage to the villain, plus X additional damage to the villain to a max of 3, where that is the stage number of the villain. So, villain's on stage 2, it's going to deal 4 damage. If they're on stage 3, the total thing is going to deal 5 damage. So basically, the longer you wait to play this card, the more effect it'll have. So if you play it in stage 1, it's going to be 1 additional damage. Stage 2, 2 additional damage. Or if you're doing expert, we start on stage 2. It's going to be dealing either 4 or 5 damage depending on that. So obviously better at later stages for the villain. So that is Browbeat. We're going to move into our next card. And next up, we have Last Stand, 0 cost event. It's a tactic, generates a mental resource when you discard it, and it's a hero interrupt. So when an ally you control attacks, it gains +3 for the attack, or for that attack. After that attack resolves, discard that ally. So, really good way to pump up your ally's attack, but really useful if your ally only has 1 health remaining. So, normally, if you were to do an attack with that ally, they would be defeated anyway, so you would do their final attack, they take their incidental damage, and they would get discarded. This way allows you to still do that, get their attack, but then you also get 3 more attack on top of it. So let's say I'm doing 2 damage with 1 incidental damage. I do 5 damage, and then basically it forces you to discard the ally at the end of basically the attack. But if it's your last possible attack that you're doing with that ally anyway, before they get defeated, you might as well just include this and have them do additional damage as well. So that is Last Stand. We're going to move into our next card. And next up, we have Bait and Switch, 1 cost event. Generates an energy resource when you discard it. It's a thwart, so hero action. Thwart, the villain attacks you, remove 4 threat from the main scheme. So if you're playing a character that can take a lot of damage, you play this, allow them to attack you, while basically, I think the thematicness of this is you basically bait them into attacking you while your ally goes over, sneaks around, and like does whatever behind the enemy's back, and then they turn around and the thing is gone or whatever. But I like the idea of basically this. If you do this on a stunned enemy, I imagine if the enemy is stunned, you can play this, have the enemy attack you to no avail. They discard the stun status, and then you get to remove 4 threat. Or if you have a teammate or an ally that has a lot of hit points, or maybe even a tough status themselves, like let's say I think it's Luke Cage comes in with a toughness status. Let's say Luke Cage is in play, and or it says you, so I think it might be villain attacks you. So I guess you can still defend with your ally if you're getting attacked. So like let's say Luke Cage comes in, defends, gets rid of these tough status, you still remove that 4 threat from the scheme. So it's a good way to get rid of threat, and also like I said, if you have a way to stun the enemy or have toughness on yourself, you can basically have that attack go off and have nothing happen to you. Or if you just have a lot of hit points and then potentially a high defense, you could then potentially maybe take no damage from that attack and still get rid of the 4th threat anyway. So I really like that card. It seems like a good way to get rid of threat on a scheme, especially if you're playing as a character that doesn't have a lot of thwart. So basically, you're taking the attack, but then also removing damage. Could work well in a I don't know how well Thor works with protection, but that could be a good card with Thor, or maybe even Hulk if you're playing Hulk protection. Even though I've only played aggression with Hulk and I think and aggression with Thor as well. I haven't played either of those too often, but these could go well in those decks. I imagine this could also go well in my Captain America deck, where the enemy is just getting constantly stunned. So that might work well there too. So that is bait and switch. We're going to move into our next card. And next up, we have Recuperation. It's a 2-cost event, generates a physical resource when you discard it. Alter Ego action, heal damage from your Alter Ego equal to your recovery. So Scarlet Witch's recovery is 3. So basically, this allows you to pay 2, recover 3, and then potentially you can also still exhaust your character to recover even further. Or if you don't want to exhaust your character at all, you can basically pay 2 and still get the amount that you would have gotten from exhausting your character. So you can basically use this to recover and then actually recover with it by exhausting your character, or just use this once to get your recover value back in hit points. So that is Recuperation. We're going to move into our next card. And next up, we have Luminous. This is Scarlet Witch's Nemesis character. So minion, 2 scheme, 2 attack, 5 health. Looks like it's an elite, from what I can tell. It's kind of a little bit blurry there. But force response, after Luminous activates against you, discard the top card of the encounter deck. If 2 or more boost icons were discarded this way, deal yourself 1 encounter card. So basically, when she activates, you get to discard a card from the encounter deck, and then if it has 2 or more boost icons, you get an encounter card. So that is Scarlet Witch's Nemesis. That can be pretty brutal, because if you're like, she's going to activate, you're going to be getting multiple encounter cards from her and from the main villain, giving you them as well. And again, 2 scheme, 2 attack with 5 health. So that is Luminous. We're going to move into our next card. And next up, we have Chaos Manipulation. This is a Treachery. 2 boost icons. Scarlet Witch is this is from her Nemesis deck as well. And when revealed, search the encounter deck and discard pile for Luminous, and put her into play engaged with you. Discard the top card of the encounter deck. If 2 or more boost icons were discarded this way, Luminous activates against you. So basically, you put her into play, and then you discard the card of the top card of the encounter deck. If it has 2 or more boost icons, the actual minion that you just put in play, activates. So there were a couple other cards from her encounter deck that were revealed, but however they were a little bit blurry, so I'm not really using those. So that is Chaos Manipulation, and we're going to move into, I believe, our final card. And our final card is Slipping Sanity. This is Scarlet Witch's Obligation card. So give to the Wand the Maximoff player. You may flip to Alter Ego form, and then choose to either exhaust Wand the Maximoff to remove Slipping Sanity from the game, or discard the top 5 cards of the encounter deck. For each star icon in the boost area discarded this way, place one threat on the main scheme, then discard this obligation. So you can either basically exile it and exhaust Scarlet Witch or exhaust Wand the Maximoff for a turn, or potentially put a bunch of threat on the main scheme. If you know the encounter deck well enough, or if there's not that many cards left in the encounter deck and you kind of know what's in there, you can do the second option, because it's only going to be putting threat on the scheme based on the number of stars, not the number of boost symbols. So if you've already seen a lot of these star symbols either get discarded, or you know the encounter deck well enough that you know that there's not a lot of star symbols in that deck at all, you can then do the second option and potentially put less threat onto the main scheme than you would by if you had a lot of stars in the deck and you just drew, like, let's say you draw 5 and you have 5 star symbols show up, that's 5 threat potentially. It's probably never going to be that much. It'll probably be between maybe like 2, maybe 3 at the most, I think. But still, depending on how much threat is already on the main scheme, you may want to go with option 1. But these obligations are usually always kind of very difficult to choose from, because one way, by exhausting her, you're getting rid of the card entirely. By doing the other option, you have the potential to pull it up again if it gets drawn out of the encounter deck, because it just gets discarded, and then potentially once the encounter deck is gone, it gets shuffled back in. And like we said earlier with Scarlet Witch, kind of discarding cards off the top of the encounter deck, you may get to this card again depending on if it got reshuffled in. So that is Slipping Sanity. That's our final card from this set. So again, we have, I believe, Quicksilver coming out this week. I'm hoping to pick him up on either Friday or Saturday. Depends on when I can actually get around to my local game store. But then I'll be doing a video, probably doing a quick unboxing video for that deck, and then probably doing quick unboxing, and then with a recap of how my first game goes. So I usually always play my first game against Rhino just to kind of test it out. So we do have Quicksilver coming out this week. I believe Scarlet Witch is probably next month, and then Guardians of the Galaxy or the Galaxy's Most Wanted, I'm not sure about. I know stuff got pushed back, but they pushed back Wasp until like a couple weeks ago, and now we have, it seems like they might be back on track now. because we do have, like I said, Quicksilver coming out Friday, hopefully. But that's going to do it for this video. Remember to like, comment, share, and subscribe. We'll see you again next time. Thanks again for watching, and take care.